So our hypothesis and what we've experienced as well is that, relationships are really kind of this timeless thing, for better or worse. There's a lot of like positive and negative connotations to this idea of tribe, but it is really compelling, and it makes that outreach way harder to ignore. And you're not trying to get everybody to say yes right away, but a much higher percentage will. And even the people that aren't ready to talk are going to have trouble ignoring an email that indicates that you're within their circle.
Welcome to Show Me the Nuggets, where each week Joe chats with world-class entrepreneurs to find out the key principles, strategies, and processes that lie behind their outstanding achievements. Now, your host, the no-bullshit serial entrepreneur, Joe Troyer.
Hey everybody, it's Joe Troyer, and welcome to another episode of Show Me the Nuggets. Today we have on agency coach Dan Englander. Dan, we were just talking about before we kicked off the show, is from New York. I'm living in Ohio. We're practically neighbors.
Yeah.
Dan, without further ado, man, welcome to the show.
Joe, thank you. Yeah, appreciate it.
So you are the founder and CEO of Sales Schema. Give us a little background real quick, a little snippet on what Sales Schema does.
Yeah, so basically we're a fractional new business team for agencies and other B2B organizations, kind of going after usually, funded startups all the way up to the biggest companies on earth. And what that means is a fancy way of saying we're going out to the market on behalf of our clients to get the meetings and keep the pipeline full regardless of what's going on their end, basically.
Cool. Really excited to dive deep in there and talk about what's working right now inside of that side of your business. But
yeah,
before we do that, let's go back. Tell us about your background. How'd you get into digital marketing in this crazy world of agency?
Yeah. So I basically, out of college, moved to New York, and like this would have been 2010, and didn't really know what I wanted to do exactly. Kind of worked a couple like BS internships. I was just talking to my fiance about this. I worked at a music promotions company, and I got fired because I wasn't cool enough. That was pretty much the reason. But anyway, like from there, I kind of like meandered and found myself into working at an ad agency, and this would have been, the earlier days of social media when you could just say, hey, we do social. And then companies would be like, here's all of our money. And I was like literally the guy that was answering, problems that people had about their product on a Facebook wall as a certain consumer electronics brand. This was when community manager was a title you could have.
Sure.
So from there, kind of moved on to a different gig, and I was in a smaller company, creative services agency, focusing on animated video, selling animation to enterprise and to brands and everything in between. And I was kind of in the classic sales client service shuffle role. I was officially an account manager. So learned a lot about that, learned a lot about how to balance outreach and actually like really what works for selling something that's intangible, for selling a complex service to a big company. Self-published a business book about that, and sort of built Sales Schema around 2014. I'd like quit my job, did the whole Tim Ferriss thing for a while, traveled Asia, started Sales Schema in 2014, and realized pretty early it was sort of like, okay, everybody is trying to get leads, everybody's trying to get beyond referrals, and is having a lot of trouble with that. Maybe that's something I can help with, and then started building the company from there, and the rest is history, as they say.
Cool, man. So give us a high level overview of what Sales Schema looks like right now. How many clients do you guys have? Kind of top line, how many team members you have, et cetera.
Yeah. So we probably have about 15 clients right now. Our biggest vertical is marketing and advertising, so especially the agency space. But we also have lots of software businesses and others that are usually looking to reach big enterprises. We have a relatively small core team of around 5 employees, based primarily stateside. And then we have a lot of contractors and everything, kind of helping with list building and that sort of thing from there.
Gotcha.
Yeah, and I'll leave it at that for now. But there's a lot I could get into in terms of how we're doing things.
Yeah, that's super interesting. So you said that you got a small team. You're mostly going after kind of enterprise clients for your agencies. Tell us a little bit more about kind of who the bread and butter is, or who the main audience is that you guys are going after in terms of enterprise clients. What's that look like?
Yeah, so usually, our client could be like an agency or a software business, and they're usually looking to reach anything from like a funded startup all the way to, Fortune 500 company or something like that. And mechanically, what we're doing is we're reaching out on behalf of the salesperson who's going to be the one like getting on the call and closing the deal and all that sort of thing. So there's, dozens of companies, thousands of lead generation companies that do this, that are probably in your inbox and in my inbox right now.
Sure.
The thing that makes us different is we used to do the classic cold outreach approach, and there's a lot of different people saying, do this tactic, do that one, use this channel, use another. And what we've experienced, I'm not disparaging anybody or saying that never works, but what we've experienced is like if you're in a service that's generally like well understood, like the agency world, the scarce resource is skepticism, is rather trust. It's not information.
Yeah.
And for that, the sort of like funnels and all this automation kind of resorts to the same thing, which is essentially going in cold and beating your head against the wall trying to get somebody that's skeptical to talk to you. And then they're not saying yes unless they have a need right then, which is really rare. It's not really a sustainable way to do outreach. So I'll pause in a second, but the way that we're thinking about it is called relationship sales at scale, and it's more about identifying the prospects who are already likely to talk to our clients because they're already in our clients' circles of influence, and kind of starting there. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it.
Gotcha. That's really cool. Yeah, I think like today, man, the landscape is so different than when you got started or when I got started, right?
Yeah.
Like the world of, you just said we do social media, and it's like, here's all my money, go do it, right? Like just raising your hand and saying like, we do this. Used to be really powerful and used to get you a lot of clients, right? When this industry, first started, and as waves came from different technology and platforms, I got started in the website building era when everybody wanted a website but didn't know why, right? It was I do websites. All right, great. Here's some money. It was that simple. And now obviously the landscape is very different, right? The market sophistication level is very different.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely true. And I think that it's like, even for new things, like for example, influencer marketing was like the cool new thing, whatever, a couple of years ago or something. And now like that's, everybody understands what it is. It has the perception of being commoditized. So I think that markets are now moving faster towards that mature phase a lot sooner. And I think it's like, just because you have something that's just because you're working in a mature market doesn't mean you have a bad business. It just means you have to communicate differently, right? And there's a lot more I could talk about there, but that informs like how we do a lot of outreach. Yeah.
No, 100% agree. I think a lot of agencies, a lot of businesses act tone deaf in the marketplace though, right? It's super sophisticated and they're leading with a message that's very elementary. And then they're wondering why, the marketing message didn't work when it worked 2 or 3 years ago. So love that.
Yeah.
Tell us more about kind of this relationship-based prospecting, I think is what you called it, right?
Yeah. Relationship sales at scale is what we're trying to trademark right now. We're in the process of, and basically it's the idea that it's like, okay, the goal is to just de-risk that first conversation, by any means necessary, get on the same page about who we're going after and de-risk that first conversation. So then the question becomes, how do you do that best? And what I think a lot of people are doing is sending people information, sending case studies and that kind of thing, which doesn't really work so well anymore. Or they're doing kind of this like uncompelling personalization, right? Where it's like, I saw you tweeted this, I read in the news you're doing that. And we, if you think about it, that's not really emotional. It's easy to ignore that kind of email. So, so our hypothesis and what we've experienced as well is that, relationships are really kind of this timeless thing, for better or worse. There's a lot of like positive and negative connotations to this idea of tribe, but it is really compelling, and it makes that outreach way harder to ignore. And you're not trying to get everybody to say yes right away, but a much higher percentage will. And even the people that aren't ready to talk are going to have trouble ignoring an email that indicates that you're within their circles, right? Within their circles of influence. So that's what that kind of does. To get more academic, and then I'll actually get to what we're doing tangibly. There's this idea of Dunbar's number, right? Which is like, we have these circles of influence. We have our family or friends, 5 people. And then it tends to go out by thirds past there. And Dunbar's number itself is about 150 acquaintances. So our whole feeling is that, well, what if it keeps going out by thirds? What if there's another, several hundred people that don't know you, but would be willing to talk to you because of a strong personal and or business commonality you have with them? So for example, like a very common campaign that we do for clients is we say, okay, we're going after this list of whatever thousands of specific companies that you really want to do business with, your dream accounts. You have this great Rolodex over here because you've been building up your business from referrals. Well, what about everyone they know, that knows somebody within these accounts? So the problem is, up until now, we've all just kind of had to happen into those referrals sporadically. but there's technology and tools to actually like go after them more deliberately. So one thing we do is we say, okay, export your contacts, tell us everyone you'd feel comfortable connecting with who you know already in order to get introduced. And for some people it's 20 people, for others it's hundreds, whatever. People that you actually know, not like your fake connections on LinkedIn you've never met or whatever. We all
For
have
sure.
those, right? From there, what we're able to do is map those people's connections into those senior roles and those ideal counts. And then we do a campaign that might last a few weeks that says, hey, Bob, hope you've been well. I noticed you're connected to these like specific people. Can we get on the phone real quick? I was wondering if you might help me out. I'm working on some business development initiatives here.
Yep.
Um, and not everybody says yes, but a very high percentage, maybe like 20 to 50% will say, yeah, I can help you out if you're specific enough about it. So it does take some work, it does take some hustle, but it's a much more deliberate way to get introduced, and just you come in with a very high degree of trust at that point. So it's one of the best things we know. So that's an example of one thing we're up to.
That's beautiful. I love it. Coming in as a referral, and almost kind of a programmatic referral kind of approach is brilliant. I love that. Almost coming in on their endorsement.
Yeah, exactly. And just doing it, just doing it more deliberately. So what we love about it is like, and we were part of the problem. So I'll take some ownership. How many times have you heard like referrals don't work? Referrals aren't enough, and they're not enough alone if you're just sort of being in reactive mode about them. But at the same time, there's this sort of like old school meets new school, timeless stuff with the new stuff that I think is really, really cool about this approach. Yeah.
That's really interesting. Yeah, we have a marketing campaign that we've helped a lot of agencies run that's really similar, that I think you might like or get value from, or might have another idea from, or say, yeah, we do something similar. Let's say that we're working with a marketing agency that works with, let's say, AC repair companies, right? We call up the supplier, right, and we ask them for referrals, right? And we just say, we know you're not in the business of doing AC repair, but we really need to find 2 or 3 contractors in this area that can take care of customers, yada, yada. And we just need somebody that we can trust and that we can count on. Who would you recommend? So we can cold call, get that person on the phone, get 3 or 4 referrals, and like 9 times out of 10 with that person's information, get through the gatekeeper and book an appointment.
Yeah.
So I can see how this would work really, really well.
Yeah, no, that's really cool. I love that approach, because it's just like, it's so much leverage and so much bang for your buck, because you're getting, potentially referred to multiple people, and then you have this like greater degree of trust that's going to put you further ahead. And the other thing that I think is like less spoken about an approach like this isn't like something that's just going to go out of style tomorrow, right? Like, we've all seen this sort of arms race of sales tactics where it's like the AI, or the sort of like, I'm going to point to some little publicly available detail on your site and reference it, but it's like, then 500 people do it and it sort of falls apart. But your relationships are something that is gonna continue to work, I think. So
yeah, I love it. Like, the method that we gave is kind of a cop out, because the relationships aren't real, right? They're very surface level, right? But that works so well. I can't imagine how well like real relationships would work, right? Like, it seems like that would be quite an amazing door opener. And this other campaign already works well for us. So yeah, I would love to think about how to run a campaign like this. So how do you do this at scale? Because like, this seems like a lot of work, to be honest.
yeah,
Right?
yeah, totally. And I just push back a little. Like, I think that the content, the question of like real relationships, like, yeah, of course there's levels of degree. Like, the relationship you have with your best friends is not going to be the relationship you have with a business acquaintance, but I still think there's more trust built into it than almost anything else, right? It's just a matter of degree. But yeah, I get what you're saying. And but to answer your question about scale, I think that it's not easy. It's not like there's just one button we push. People ask where you're getting the data and yada yada, proprietary, this and that. But we have around 15 list builders and scrubbers that are kind of like making this work and getting different data for different campaigns and kind of putting it together to get the scale. And we might be contacting like 50 to 200 people per business day. And to some people that might sound like a massive number. To others, I think to a lot of people, it's not. It's actually like a reasonable number to balance that personalization and that scale. But I think, even if people are listening and they never hire us, I think a way that you can think about this is front loading that work, right? Because like up until now, if you're thinking about doing outreach, it's a lot of backloading. It's like, yeah, I'm going to go spit out a list, whatever CMOs of this type of industry company, et cetera. And then I'm going to backload the work by spending so much time like tinkering with copy and like software products and stuff. This is more about like, you don't have to worry about it. The copy really matters, but you don't have to worry about this complex funnel as much. It's more about the identification and then writing this kind of Mad Lib template that draws on those strong commonalities. So for example, like if you're listening and you're thinking about DIYing this, one really simple exercise doesn't work for everyone. And I'm not saying it'll work for sure, but it tends to work really well is like, just people in your backyard. Like, okay, you have this list of dream accounts. You can find pretty easily the prospects that are in Denver or in Austin saying, hey, I'm right next to you. You know, we've done a lot of work in your field. That's now going to get a much higher rate of response than going in cold, right? Or finding, okay, what about all the companies that went to the same trade show you did 2 years ago and starting from that premise. So it's going to take a little more legwork at the beginning, but it's going to produce better returns.
Way more.
That's kind of how we think about it.
Way more personable for sure. 100%. Love that. So you've worked with a lot of more enterprise agencies, it seems. What are the commonalities of the most successful kind of enterprise agencies that you think are kind of thriving versus the ones that are maybe kind of stuck? Because you get to see kind of behind the curtain, so to speak, of a lot of different agencies working with them so closely.
Yeah, no, it's a really good question, and it's sort of it reminds me of that Dostoevsky line, like all happy families are the same and all unhappy families are unique in their unhappiness. I might be butchering that line, but it's a little like that.
Sounds good.
But I actually think thinking about it more, it actually might be the inverse of that, right? So I think that there's a lot of ways to get it right, but it's more easy to identify the ways in which agencies aren't doing it. But I think the big theme is specialization, right? I think the agencies that are on the rise now are specialized in some way. It could be niching. That's like a really tried and true way to do it. It also could be something that you do that's really unique, that's tangible, and can apply to verticals that are kind of the same. So I think it's going to be hard to get away from that sort of specialization. I don't think it's a good time to be one of these big bloated AORs, agencies of record. Like it's not a really a good spot for them right now. Beyond that, I think the other thing that a lot of these agencies are getting right is just the consistency of sales efforts and a division of duties with those sales efforts. And that's something that we help with a lot, but even companies that don't hire us, they're thinking about first, order of operations, like if you're an owner and you're in that sales seat, getting the fulfillment off your plate so you can sell. Once you figured that out, getting support at the top of the funnel. And then once you figure that out, getting somebody else to sell for you and close those deals, as opposed to thinking of sales as something that you do in between projects when you have time, that sort of thing. So it's a lot of just sort of like consistent everyday sales efforts is another thing we see. And there's probably a lot more there, but I'll leave it at that.
Great. No, those are definitely some great tips. When you think about your clients, how long do you think their sales cycles are normally? Are they long? When you talk about enterprise clients, I assume that means long sales cycles for me, right?
I mean, it's not necessarily just enterprise, but I think we tend to work with, for context, to be more specific, like deal sizes where our clients are selling anything from like a 20K lifetime value at the very bottom up to like, millions of dollars or whatever at the top. So for those sales cycles, I think, it's probably like what we see is like a 3 to 12 month sales cycle a lot of the times. And of course, there's exceptions. There's people that need it right now. I think a lot of the times, we're working with agencies that have built themselves up on referrals and they don't really know what their numbers are because they're not really experiencing an opportunity till it's an opportunity, till it's ready to go and so on. So I think that can kind of like give people a clouded view of sales cycle. If you're doing outreach and you're getting somebody at the problem aware stage, not the solution aware stage, that's going to be that, multi-month sort of situation most of the time. Sure. But it's worth it because you're in control of your efforts basically.
Yeah. I mean, what's difficult, and I'm sure you guys struggle with this or see this all the time in those long sales cycles, is just, you go to test something new and it's like, is this working? Right. And it's, having the willpower, if you will, to see it through, to get enough data to see if it's actually working, running like Google Ads campaigns, even for a faster sales cycle, we're always, is this working? Are the numbers going to pan out? And we're getting asked that question 30 days into an agreement with one of our vendors, right? Or with one of our partners. So when I think about long sales cycles, like they always spook me, right? Like I always steer away from them because I don't want to have to keep reselling the prospect, or in my mind, that's what I tell myself, right? Like that it will work. So like, I think I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you, like, how do you deal with running an agency where your clients have these long sales cycles?
Yeah. I mean, well, I think one thing you have to do is you have to judge the intermediary falsifiable actions that happen, which sounds like a lot of jargon, but you have to look at pipeline value, and you have to like look at pipeline value in a way that is real and not just and that isn't subject to your own whims, right? Because like, how many times have you heard, MQL, SQL, all these different stages that can mean anything to anyone?
Yeah.
Well, we like to keep it just like really simple and just say like, okay, how many appointments are we getting? What steps have they gone through? Like, have they actually shown up versus gotten to the next stage of proposal and gotten all their decision makers on board versus, obviously closed. So that's really what you have to do is judge those middle stages. But then, our clients that have been at this for a while, they tend to get that because they're like, yeah, we're selling, multi-million-dollar lifetime values. When we get a client, it's for a long time. I think that there's not necessarily a right or wrong way to do it. If you're going after small, medium-sized businesses, yeah, the sales cycle might be a little faster. But I think what's sort of deadly is that like middle ground where you're selling, a low end service for like a very low four-figure amount or something, but your sales cycle is still going to be long because you're selling to like a small, medium, whatever, not necessarily an SMB, but somebody where that's going to be a serious consideration.
Yeah.
And then you're getting like the worst of both worlds, right? Where it's like you're not making much, but also your sales cycle's long. So I think you can kind of go either way. But I think for outbound and just for like the amount of time it takes to go through that process, like you might as well have a big enough pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. And yes, selling to bigger companies has some unique challenges, but it's not that much harder than selling to like the owner of a pizza shop. It's still
Sure.
humans. So
For sure.
that's,
That makes
that's kind of
sense.
our thought on it. Yeah.
When a client says like, how long do you think, Dan, it's going to take for me to see a return on investment? Like
Yeah.
how do you answer that question being in a long sales cycle?
Yeah, it's a good question. So the first thing we say is like, look, the two things, I think this applies, and probably you would sympathize with this. Most of our clients do as well, because they're also agencies. It's like we have to say, here are the things we have control over that you should hold us accountable to, and that's meeting volume and meeting relevance. Meeting relevance is in right company, senior enough time. Those are the only things we can control. That said, what we tend to see with our clients, depending on their skill level, depending on frankly, their motivation, and other things like that, is probably like month 6 through 12, or when our clients are seeing ROI. And, usually for us to be a fit, people have to be down for that.
100%.
Yeah. So that's kind of how we're thinking about it. But I think that's the case for any, sales and marketing channel for a significant deal size. Like the idea of somebody's going to come in and flip a switch and out comes the business. It's like, well, if they get really lucky, maybe, but it's probably not going to happen. Yeah.
No, I completely agree. And that's not an unrealistic time frame at all.
Yeah.
So interesting. So we talked about some ideas for like the DIYer on how they can do some things like this. We talked about kind of what your team looks like, how you ended up in this space. You talked a little bit about kind of other things that you have to help your clients with in order for them to get the result, right? So you're not just worrying about bringing them in the leads that are the right fit. What are some of those top things that you say, like you guys have to help with or train for or help them do in order to get the result that they're looking for, from your guys's service?
Yeah, that's a really good question. I mean, I think the biggest one is just like time and motivation. That's one thing we really suss out before we agree to partner with somebody is, I'd say about half the time we're working with an owner, and sometimes it just has to be like that. And even in large agencies, sometimes the owner is still the main salesperson. So that's not a deal breaker, but assuming we're in that situation, we have to make sure that they can block off significant time. There's not there's not a specific amount of time, but if it's like, if you have less than 10 hours a week to focus on new business, it's going to be hard to make anything work. And usually like people are fooling themselves if they have this ambitious growth goal, but they can't really devote that amount of time. So that's the most important thing. Beyond that, what we tend to say is like, okay, because a lot of people will come to us and they think they're awesome at sales, and we're like, we'll see, we'll see how this goes. You haven't really dealt with people outside of referrals yet. So from there, if we're a few months in and we're getting lots of the right types of prospects in, but they're not closing, then we might suggest coaches and other partners in our network that can help with like positioning and that sort of thing, to move the process along. But the people, some of whom we've interviewed on the show, like John Surakis, who has a successful agency in the web dev space and as a digital mastermind, they have processes that are very deliberate, that are ironed out. They're like John's working on fine tuning that all the time, and it's often involves not sort of being in this reactive mode. Like if you have an agency that is very ROI centric, that's one thing. You'd be like, great, you hire us, we do a test, whatever, we do a pilot, it's going to make you this result. I think what's more challenging is if you have sort of a pull market agency, like we build giant websites or we build mobile apps, you still have to bring people in the door. And if the only action is like, well, you don't want to build a 6-figure site now, I guess I'll see you later, that's tougher to make work. And what the best agencies in that mode have, they have a situation where it's like, can you pay us for a strategy and we'll show you exactly what we would build or some other thing. And they're very proactive about outlining all the benefits for that, showing it off and moving the process forward. So that's kind of what we tend to see, and through, others in our network tend to work out with their clients. Yeah, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. If you're working with a brand new agency, or not a brand new agency, brand new sales team, right? They're doing a fresh build out because the owner's always been in charge of sales. He's always been the bottleneck. They're doing good revenue though. Like they got a nice fulfillment team. Any advice on how they go about structuring a sales team, who they hire first, what that looks like based upon, your kind of experience in this space?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I think the first thing is to not hire the driver until you have the car. Is kind of like the metaphor we use, right? So a lot of the times what we see is there'll be an owner that's in the sales seat, they're bogged down with it, they don't like sales, they don't want to do it, so they're like, I know, I'll go hire this 6-figure person that says they have an amazing Rolodex and they interview really well, and then they get them on, and then they're like, great, like here's our portfolio and case studies. They send them off out into the cold, and then like 6 months later they've produced nothing, and then they're like, oh, this person sucks, I got burned, right? And the problem with that is like, well, that person probably is successful and is good, but they're like used to being successful within a context where they have lots of support and they have an existing system, right? And that's not really there, and chances are you've never had to really build that yet. So to answer your question, I think the first thing is like, don't step out of the sales seat too fast if you're an owner. It's going to take a serious amount of time and resource investment to get to the place where you can actually step out of the sales seat. Some people say you never can. I don't agree with that. I think that if I always say, like, I'm in New York, I'm looking out on a skyline of complex service businesses that manage to train people how to sell. Like it's definitely doable. So I think the first thing is to figure out top of funnel, right? To figure out like, how are we bringing in prospects? And then once they're in, what is that repeatable sales process that I'm using, so I'm not switching it up each time to get people involved? And there's 100 years of sales training that it probably doesn't change that much that you can leverage there. And that could be through a company like ours, helping with top of funnel, or it could be doing it in-house, which takes a while. From there, once that's in order and you're getting prospects in reliably and you have that process, then you're thinking about that 6-figure plus role. And
Gotcha.
And then your job becomes part sales trainer. You're not just going to be able to hire that role and step off. Like we just hired a salesperson, and that's my job. Part-time job is sales training, basically, throughout the week. So that's kind of how my experience with it anyway. Yeah.
Perfect. Love it. I think that all makes perfect sense. Then would you advise, and I think that this is what you're saying, but correct me if I'm wrong, Dan, you would advise first kind of working on getting the appointment set, right? And the business owner then still closing those, but getting somebody to take that over, kind of the SDR role, if you will, and then long-term pulling yourself out of sales. Is that right?
Yeah, exactly. And the reason behind that is because like a lot of the times people are just like, well, we need sales, and they're like lumping like 500 skill sets into like this one
Sure.
thing. But the process of getting consistent meetings teed up is like it's a lot of skill sets that it's unrealistic to find in one single person.
Right.
And even if you could, that person's going to be stretched too thin, and you want all, you want the high level closers time spent closing. For example, like what we do in our company, and if you DIY this, you're going to have to find these skill sets. Is it's part operations, it's part strategy and creative, and it's part hustle to get those meetings
Sure.
booked.
Yep.
Strategy and creative is in who are we contacting and what are we saying to them. Operations is in I need to find a list builder and make this data go into this place and this software, etc. Hustle is in I need to follow up with this person to get them to show up to the appointment. So you have all that, and then you have selling after that. So it's like that's kind of how we see it, is like you need that division of duties, even if it's just you splitting your time between those tasks. Yeah.
No, that's really well put. Just throwing an SDR in without that strategy, without that coaching, without that leadership, is never going to work. So yeah, I think we're talking the same language. I always recommend that agencies start with that kind of leadership role and the strategic role, and to get some messaging that works, then pull on an SDR, get out of it, right? Play the leadership role, then get out of it, and then ultimately, get out of sales in the long term. But it can definitely take a lot of time.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think it's just about taking it one step at a time. And if you're starting from zero, the first thing is actually getting is not trying to replace yourself or hire others. It's actually getting, well, it might be hiring others, but it's getting the fulfillment off your plate, getting as much of that client work, and so on. Yeah.
Perfect, man. So in this personalized sales approach, I guess to wrap it up, we're using relationships, we're using referrals, we're kind of doing it more to some degree at scale, but not to a crazy degree. We're running campaigns. You gave us a couple of great ideas. You were just at this event, or you're in the same city as us, and reaching out with those angles. If you're looking for more of the done for you approach, are there any other kind of general campaigns that you guys like to run? Kind of high level ideas like that?
Yeah, for sure. So, like the craziest thing we ever did was we found people that played tennis in college, like our client did, that were in, the Fortune 500. So I think a lot of it can just be like really personal stuff. I think like a lot of the times we like to trip ourselves up too much with the business thing, and
Yeah,
it just
for sure.
doesn't work as well. Like one thing we do a lot of are, sometimes we have clients that are expats, from other places. We'll find people that they want to talk to that are Venn diagrammed with their market, that are also from that place, and that tends to work really well.
That's really cool.
I'm trying to think of some others. Another, like one thing that actually on the more business side that we've done is like, let's say you have a client that's like a large company or something, finding people that used to work there that have now gone to other places where you might like to do business, and say, hey, we've done so much work with Nike, so you're at Reebok now. That can be really compelling. So it's really just kind of finding these like strong commonalities between individuals that don't exist on a business level, that tends to work really well. Yeah. So those are a few things
Love
we've
that.
tried. Yeah.
So those campaigns are great. And then in terms of copy, we're mentioning the referrals, so to speak, right, in the copy. And then are we going right for the jugular, right? We going for a discovery call, we going for a sales call? How do we bridge the gap between, hey, you're a referral, to come and buy?
Yeah, it's a great question. So I think the short answer is like usually yes. I think that the barrier to getting a conversation is tough, but I think it's not as tough as people think it is, because we've sort of like gotten a lot of this propaganda about how like, well, people need to like research and read a million articles before they're ready to speak first and all this stuff. And like, yes, that does happen, and some people are going to want to, like, there's a certain minority that will want to do that and never will take the meeting. But like, what's underappreciated is how much people in buying roles don't want to have to read a bunch of stuff, and sometimes talking is
Yeah.
actually easier. But the hill you're having to get over is just that trust gap, right? Like, am I going to have my time wasted? Can this person be trusted? It's like, okay, you're an agency, I know what agencies do. What makes this different? And really that kind of vote of confidence, either from a referral or some other connection with the commonality, can be enough. So I think it's worth mentioning, like, you don't want to sell against yourself too much, and and put yourself into the the same context as your prospect is. So yeah, I think that you can ask for that, especially if it's referred. I mean, one campaign we do a lot of is just referencing people that our clients have in common and going direct and saying, hey, we know these same people. We're in your
Yep.
space. Can we talk? That
Yep.
will get you a much higher degree of meetings. Yeah.
So if we use the example that I gave earlier, like we're going to prospect like our clients as an agency are heating and air contractors, right, across the US. Like what we find is getting referrals from those heating and air contractors to other heating and air contractors is rare, right? It's like pulling teeth. Usually where their minds go right away is like they like introduce us to a competitor, right? And like the alarm bells just go off. Like no way. Like I'm not giving my marketing connection to a competitor. And a lot of them don't seem to mastermind or network kind of as much as we do in the digital marketing and agency space. Any tips or ideas on how we might make a campaign like that more effective?
Yeah, I think it was kind of like what I was covering earlier, where like you might not be able to, like if you think of like spokes around a hub, you might not be able to bounce from spoke to spoke, but if you can talk to a lot of hubs, you're going to be able to get to all the spokes. So it might be like you mentioned. I think you have a really solid campaign there, like going to partners and others kind of involved in that, and
Yep.
thinking about that sort of thing. I think the thing that a lot of people are kind of doing that anyway. I think the thing that you've gotten really right, and that we're working on as well, is batching that up and just being able to like know that that's a high ROI activity and just kind of continuing to do it.
100%.
Yeah. Mhm.
Love that. No, like that answer was great, Dan. I got a big aha out of that, right? Like maybe instead of asking for the referrals, or if you get a no on that for the direct heating and cooling company, right? Ask for the hub. Ask for the people that already have those clients. Who are the other vendors that they're working with, and ask for recommendations into them, because they have lots of spokes that they can introduce you to, right?
Right.
So I think that's really valuable.
Yeah, and I think like one thing that people will sometimes say, and I get it because I feel it too, is like, well, is this greedy? Or you like, working your network too much, or being selfish with this? And what I found is like if you present it the right way and you're just like really honest about it, people will help you, and it actually doesn't read as negative, because it's like that's what we're all doing out here, and also like these are people that and you have a relationship with, and also just being willing to help as well, coming in with ideas and intros you can make, really works well.
Awesome. Well, that's a lot of ideas on how people, if they're looking to DFY it, do it themselves, can do it. And obviously, if people are interested, they can come check you guys out at Sales Schema, have a conversation with you, and see if there might be a fit working together. You also run the Digital Agency Growth Podcast. Tell us a little bit about what that show is like, if you will.
Yeah, for sure. So we've had that for a few years now, and we are basically looking to help agency owners with growth and all that sort of thing. But we tend to go pretty agnostic with the sorts of guests we have on. We've had CEOs of tech companies. We had Jen Say, who's the CMO of Levi's. I think her title's actually gone up now. So we've had some really interesting guests on. We've had just like a lot of agency owners that have talked about their journey, building in public, and also others that have gone from either the agency world to other places and talked about transitioning companies. So we've had a lot of like really really interesting conversations on, and we try to go outside of just like nerdy sales tactics and that sort of thing. Yeah.
That's awesome. We'll definitely link that up for the show notes for you as well. Is there anything else that you think we'd be remiss not to chat about today while we're here, Dan?
Oh yeah, probably. I'm not sure exactly. I think just kind of staying ahead of the way that the agency landscape's changing. Like I think right now, a lot of everything's kind of morphing together in weird ways. So I don't know if we're going to have the exact same models that we've had for the last like 30 years. Like for example, you have publishers like the New York Times and stuff have started just full on agencies. You have
Yeah.
software companies that are becoming publishers. You have agencies that are becoming software companies. So I think that it's kind of one of these, it's sort of a space where you can like redefine what you're doing pretty easily. Like for example, we're launching a sales engagement platform. We'll see if it works. I think a lot of people have failed doing that, so we'll see what happens.
Yep.
I think that's like a big topic, but just sort of, it's a good time to broad frame, how you want to serve your audience. Like I think Seth Godin has a really good quote where it's like, find products for your people, not people for your products, kind of thing.
100%.
So yeah.
No, I love that. I think I tell agencies all the time, like, stick in a niche, and your job becomes like just to care about them, to find the products and services that they need, find the solutions that they don't have, right? And to give them. That's very similar to the Godin scenario. So love that. And yeah, I mean, this industry is changing faster than ever. And I agree. You got to embrace the change, or you're probably going to get left behind.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
Love it. So, man, and wrapping up, Dan, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us. I always ask the same question at the end. And instead of asking people to recommend 3 books that are like their favorite, I just ask, like, what's the one favorite book? Like, what's the one book that's made the biggest impact on the way you do business or the way you live your life? Or as you look at your business, as you look at your life, like, what's the one book that you see?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's really hard. There's so many. So the one that comes to mind though is The War of Art by Stephen Pressfield.
Yeah.
Just like really inspiring, and it's just sort of like gets you in touch with the resistance and doing the hard thing and the hard thinking. I know you just asked for one, but another one that I'm reading right now that I'm really enjoying is The Road Less Stupid by Keith Cunningham.
Great book.
Which I'm really liking, because it's sort of like, there's been these two kind of like schools of thought with business. There's the E-Myth Revisited, which is like, hey, get out of the business, don't work on anything, get others to, so you just own this asset. Yeah. And then there's the other side, which is like, no, do all the hard work, like Gary Vee, just keep hustling and do all the jobs at once, kind of thing. And Keith Cunningham's perspective, just to sum it up, is like, and he might disagree with this, but it's sort of like, no, you have a job, like you have a job to do, and don't fool yourself into thinking you don't until you sell your business and you're actually out of it. But that job doesn't have to mean like arbitrary, meaningless activities. It could mean sitting around thinking really hard about complex, difficult problems and doing a little less, making like fewer, bigger decisions. So I'm really liking it anyway. Yeah.
Dude, I love both of those books. The first one, doing the hard things and showing up every day. I love that book so much that I actually downloaded a bunch of his other books to start going through as well. And The Road Less Stupid, definitely great, has spurred me as well, I think, like you said, to spend more time thinking about the business, brainstorming about the business, instead of being involved in the business. And just thinking about it in different ways and measuring decisions and thinking through what are our next action steps, instead of just blindly kind of going into here's what we're going to do for the quarter.
Yeah, exactly. It's been big, and it's like each one of those sections you could just spend like a whole week on one part of that book. So it's really helpful. Yeah.
I like taking a chapter of the book and every 2 weeks, basically re-going through that chapter and then having thinking time for that chapter. And it's been really, really impactful in my business. So definitely agree with your recommendations.
Yeah, right on, Joe. And I'd love to hear your recs at some point. So hopefully we will have you on the show.
Yeah, we'll have to do that. Thank you, Dan. We really appreciate it. Thanks for all the knowledge. You guys know where to check him out. You guys can see the links down in the show notes. Joe Troyer signing out.
Thank you, Dan.
Thanks for tuning in to Show Me the Nuggets. If you've been enjoying the podcast and find our content helpful, please visit our Apple Podcast page, hit the subscribe button, and leave us a review. Joe and the whole team have been working hard to bring more value to the show. Your feedback will go a long way in helping us make the show better and reach a wider audience.